I was never the type of person who believed in stories about life after death. I'd always been a man of science, rational down to the last strand of hair. But what happened to me that day still leaves me speechless. It was an ordinary late afternoon. We were celebrating a family birthday at Sleepy Hollow Lake, and I had stepped out for a moment to call my mother from a payphone. The sky, which had been clear before, changed in a matter of minutes. Dark clouds gathered, and the air became charged with electricity. Still, I didn't think much of it. I picked up the phone, dialed the number, and waited. It was at that moment that I felt an explosion of light and pain simultaneously. There was no warning, no time to react, just a deafening boom, and the world turned upside down. The next thing I noticed was an absolute silence. No pain, no sound, just a strange feeling of lightness. When my eyes adjusted, I saw something that made my heart stop. My own body lying on the ground, motionless, while people ran around me in desperation. My mother-in-law was there, terrified, screaming my name. An unknown woman, whom I later discovered was a nurse, knelt beside me and began pressing on my chest. But the most frightening part, I was seeing all of this happen from a different place. I can't explain how, but I was no longer in my body. I was standing watching the scene from a perspective that simply didn't make sense. I tried to speak, tried to shout so that someone would hear me, but nothing came out of my mouth. The sensation was bizarre, as if I were there and at the same time, not there. I moved toward my body, or at least that's what I tried to do. But walking was no longer natural. I was gliding effortlessly, as if I were not subject to the normal rules of physics. I tried to touch my own shoulder, as if trying to wake a friend, but my hand passed right through me. The realization hit me at that moment. I was dead, or at least something very close to it. Yet, the terror I thought I would feel never came. Instead, a strange tranquility took hold of me. It was as if my brain knew that this was a problem, but my soul, or whatever was there, was accepting it all as part of a natural process. There was no suffering, only a growing curiosity about what would come next. I watched the nurse working on my body, the frightened looks on my family's faces, and a certainty settled in me. Life continued, but I was no longer a part of it in the way I had always known. From that moment on, something strange began to happen. I felt as if I were being sucked by an invisible force, being pulled away from the scene. The world around me started to lose focus, as if it were dissolving, and before I could understand what was happening, I found myself in a completely different space. Everything was light, but not just any light. It was something I had never seen before, a bluish-white, vivid, pulsating light that seemed to completely envelop me. There were no walls, no floor, no sky, only this immense and comforting light radiating an indescribable peace. I felt whole in a way I had never felt before. There was a sense of fullness, of belonging. A presence was there. I can't explain how, but I knew. It wasn't a voice, it wasn't a face, but it was as real as any person I had ever known. It was as if that presence knew me deeply, in a way that I had never known myself. And deep down, I knew that it was God, not in the religious or dogmatic sense that I'd always heard about, but as an energy, a being of absolute love, of total understanding. In that instant, I realized I wasn't just watching my life. I was feeling everything again, but from a different perspective. It was as if every moment was projected directly within me, without the need for words or images. I saw my childhood, the times I fought with my siblings, the moments when I disappointed the people I loved. But what impressed me the most was that I wasn't just re-watching the facts. I felt the impact my actions had on others. When I was harsh with someone, I felt that person's pain. When I helped someone, I felt the joy they experienced. Everything was interconnected. This was the clearest truth I had ever known. Our actions do not occur in a vacuum. They leave marks on others, and in the end those marks become part of who we really are. But the most incredible part was the complete absence of judgment. No one was condemning me, no one was punishing me. It was just a profound understanding of what my life had been like, as if I were seeing everything through the eyes of a consciousness much greater than my own. And as much as there was regret for some things, there was also an overwhelming love. As if that presence were saying, I know I always knew, and you were never alone. Then I was overcome by an even stronger sense of freedom. There was no pain, no weight, only an absolute lightness, as if I had dissolved into existence itself. And somehow I knew I was going somewhere. There was no fear. On the contrary, it was a feeling of pure excitement, as if something wonderful was about to happen. I floated, increasingly immersed in that light, and felt that I was being carried to a destination that I did not understand, but accepted completely. And then everything changed. Suddenly, I felt a sudden tug, as if someone had grabbed me and ripped me from that state of ecstasy. The light began to fade, and an intense pain took over me. I didn't want to leave. I tried to resist, but it was as if I were being sucked back into something heavy, dense, suffocating. My body, and before I could protest, I woke up. The first thing I saw was the nurse leaning over me, her face tense, her hands still pressing on my chest. My throat was burning, my lungs felt like they were on fire. I was back, and the only thing I managed to say breathlessly was, "It's all right, I'm a doctor." The shock of being back in my body was brutal. The pain that hadn't existed before was now unbearable. My nerves felt like they were burning. My heart still hammered in my chest as if it had been forcibly reanimated. I heard voices around me, people talking to me, but nothing made sense. Everything seemed muffled, as if I still wasn't completely fitted into my body. As conscious as I was, a part of me still clung to what I had just experienced. I wanted to go back. I desperately wanted to return to that place of light, of peace, where nothing hurt, where everything made sense. But there was no choice. I was here. The nurse looked at me and let out a nervous laugh when I said I was a doctor. "Well, you weren't a minute ago," she replied. The others around seemed both relieved and shocked that I was conscious. The ambulance was called, but I knew there was nothing that could be done. The doctors would only say the obvious. It was a miracle that I was alive. There was no logical explanation for me to have survived a direct lightning strike on a payphone. But for me, the biggest question wasn't that. The question that hammered in my mind was, why did I come back? In the following days, reality seemed different. The things that were once normal now seemed irrelevant. I tried to resume my routine, attend to patients, continue with my life, but nothing seemed the same anymore. How could I simply go back to normal after having seen what I saw, after having felt what I felt? I tried to explain it to myself in a rational way, but no matter how hard I tried, I knew it wasn't just a simple delusion caused by the shock. What I experienced was real. I was out of my body. I was somewhere else. And the feeling of that presence still echoed within me. For weeks, I could barely sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived that experience. I remembered the light, the peace, the absolute freedom. I remembered the life review, that certainty that everything we do matters. I was no longer afraid of death. But the strangest part was that I began to feel something I had never experienced before, an uncontrollable desire to play the piano. I had never been interested in music, never played an instrument in my life, but suddenly it was as if there were a melody inside me, insisting on being released. The obsession with music took over me in a way I couldn't explain. During the day, while attending to patients or performing surgeries, my mind was invaded by notes and chords that I had never learned, yet they seemed to be engraved within me. At night, I dreamed of pianos playing melodies I had never heard before, yet somehow they felt familiar. After a few weeks of resisting without understanding what was happening, I gave in. I bought a used piano, and started playing, without any previous experience. To my surprise, my hands knew exactly what to do. I didn't need sheet music. I didn't need to learn music theory. The melodies just flowed. It was as if I were merely translating something that already existed inside me. My family thought it was strange. My doctor friends laughed at the idea, but I knew that it was more than just a sudden hobby. It was as if the near-death experience had activated something within me, as if that light, that presence, had left a gift inside me. And every time I played, I felt a trace of that peace, as if I were reconnecting with something greater. But there was one thing that never left my mind, the feeling that I had come back for a reason. I had always heard stories of people who had near-death experiences and returned transformed, but I never imagined that it could happen to me. Before that event, my life was based solely on logic, on science, on what could be proven. Now I knew there was something beyond, something that couldn't be measured or analyzed through tests, but was as real as anything in this world. I asked myself countless times, was I meant to share this experience? Should I tell the world what I saw? But every time I tried, I felt foolish. A respected doctor talking about a spiritual experience. Who would believe that? Who would take it seriously? Even so, something inside me told me that this story wasn't just mine, that what I saw and felt wasn't just for me. What should be done with this knowledge? How to move forward now that everything had changed? These questions continue to haunt me to this day. As the months passed, I tried to live my life normally, but it was impossible to ignore the impact of what I had experienced. The feeling that something greater was guiding me never disappeared. I used to think that consciousness was just a byproduct of the brain, something that went out with death, like a light bulb that burns out. But now, I knew it wasn't that way. I had been out of my body. I saw my own physical form lying on the ground while I still existed, still thought, still was me. This completely changed my view on life and death. The fear of dying, which I didn't even know I carried, simply vanished. I knew that death was not an end, but a transition. Something told me that my mission wasn't over yet, that there was something I needed to do before departing again. But what? No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, that thought accompanied me every day. It was then that I decided to delve into the study of near-death experiences. I began to read accounts from other people, to seek explanations, to try to understand whether what I experienced was unique or if there were others who had gone through the same. And to my surprise, I discovered that I was not alone. There were thousands of accounts similar to mine, people who were declared dead for minutes, some even for hours, and came back with almost identical stories. The light, the life review, the feeling of peace, the abrupt return to the body. It was as if all these experiences were pieces of a puzzle that no one could yet completely assemble. The more I read, the more I realized that what happened to me wasn't a delusion. It wasn't a dream. It was real. And then something changed within me. I realized that it made no sense to keep this to myself. If so many other people had gone through it and shared their stories, perhaps mine could help someone too. Perhaps someone was experiencing the fear of death, the loss of a loved one, and my experience could bring some comfort, some hope. I still don't know exactly what it all means, but I know that I can't simply ignore it. I went beyond life, saw something that no one can fully explain, and came back. And if I came back, there must be a reason. Perhaps the answer will come with time. But until then, I continue to seek understanding of what I experienced and what it really means. Even after all this time, that experience has never left me. I still catch myself thinking about that moment, about that light, about that absolute peace that seemed so more real than anything I have ever experienced in this world. I lived something that defies everything I learned as a doctor, everything I had always considered true. Before, my life was simple. The body was a machine, the mind was just a function of the brain, and when the heart stopped, everything ended. But now, I know that isn't true. I was there, conscious, separated from my body, feeling everything in a way that science still can't explain. And no matter how much I have come back, the feeling that what I experienced was more real than life itself has never disappeared. Sometimes, when I am alone, I sit at the piano and play those melodies that emerged out of nowhere. Every time I do that, I feel a connection with something greater, as if I were, for a brief moment, reliving that state of fullness. I don't know if I will ever find all the answers, but one thing is for sure. Life doesn't end with death. I know this because I have been on the other side, and I came back. The strangest thing of all is that, no matter how hard I tried to put this experience into words, I feel that I can never truly convey the depth of what I lived. It doesn't matter how many times I recount this story, it always seems that something is lost in the explanation. Perhaps it is because some things are not meant to be understood, only lived. I was never a religious person, I never sought out this kind of experience, but it happened, and now I carry this knowledge with me, without having all the answers, but with an absolute certainty. There is something beyond, something that we can't see, but that is there, waiting for us when the time comes. To this day, I don't know why I came back. I don't know why I was torn from that place and brought back to this world. But one thing I know, this experience changed everything. I am a different man now, and regardless of what the future brings, I will never see life the same way again.